Hi everybody, thanks for coming to this webinar today. I have a lot to cover today. What I'll be showing is two text effects, both created with Boris Continuum Complete 3D Objects. Let me show you a couple of quick times to show you what I'll be covering. First will be a text animation in the style of Fringe. This is what it looks like. So you see floating text. Now the whole thing with Fringe is or the title style is that the title effects look like they're part of the shot. They look like they were shot there. The second one I'm going to be showing you is TRON style effects, which I know that these are not probably playing too smoothly, but it can hopefully give you the idea of what I'm going to be showing you. So pretty simple. If you haven't seen the TRON style effects, let me jump over to YouTube a minute and I'll kind of just go through a couple of examples that are on YouTube. You can see how the 3D text is composited right into the shot with shadows and all that, and it moves with the shot. It's tracked with the shot, match moves. So that's the whole idea of it. Let me, just close my window there. I have a couple of other examples that are kind of cool. That wasn't the one, but that gives you another idea. Oh, it's this one here, this locations. And these are all on YouTube. Turn off the sound there. So you can see there's all different styles of effects, or all different moves. And this one's pretty cool. Alright, so the one I'm going to be using, this is a film that I worked on briefly called 7 Stones. And it this shot wasn't used, actually the text in the shot wasn't used, the shot was used in the film. So I'd like to thank Tom Norton, director of the film, for allowing me to use his footage here. What I'm going to be doing, this one's already made, but I'll walk through how I did this. I'm going to be tracking the stone here below the text, and I'll be using Mocha AE, which ships with Adobe After Effects. And then I'll be bringing in the data and attaching that to a null object. So let's get started here. I'm going to open Mocha, which I thought was open already. When you go to Mocha, when you launch it, just click Start. One nice thing is that it launches really fast. And I'm going to go to File, New Project, and I'll import my clip. Now this clip is called 7 Stones. It's the exact duration that I need. There are a few gotchas if you're using longer footage. Sometimes I've had problems lining up the frames when I bring in the data for some reason. I'm not sure if it was the footage or what. This is a very simple project, so we're going to be using the default settings for this. So I'm just going to click OK here, and you'll see the footage. Yes, I have this saved already, so yes, I'm going to be overwriting my data. All right, now there's several places that I could track here. I could track this bunny. I could track shoes over here. Now this footage is it was shot on a Canon 7D, and it's 24 frames per second. With Mocha, it's a planar tracker, not a point tracker, so it's not as if I need to find a bright spot and track to that. What I'm doing is tracking a texture around the points of or an object. So what I'm going to do here is just outline this stone. I'll be using this the X spline and just tap around it with my, I'm using a tablet here. And to close off my mask, I'm going to hold down the Control key and click. So I can move these as I need to. And everything else, I'm just going to use all of the default settings. I don't need to get in too tight. It's not like a rotoscope. This will be perfect. So let me track forward. It's the button on the right. And when you're tracking, just keep an eye on it. Make sure that the track doesn't jump. There's a few things that make this shot a little bit difficult to track in other programs, like the After Effects tracker, for example, the built-in one. The rain is an issue. It's handheld, so there's quite a bit of movement. That's another issue. And you'll notice these flashes. These flashes are lightning that was generated on the set with a little flashing machine of some sort. So just keep your eye on your track as it's tracking to make sure nothing happens. If it does, all you need to do is stop it and then move your points and start your track up again. You can track forward, backwards, one frame at a time. Depending on shots, I've had to do that. You know, some crazy shots where things go a little haywire. So this is almost done. Just let this finish. All right, so there's two options down here for exporting data. I can export tracking data or export shape data. The shape data would be something you'd use for replacing screens, for example, or replacing a logo on the side of a truck as it's driving by. We're going to export tracking data. There's a few settings here. We'll be using export transform data, which is your anchor point position, scale, and rotation. There's an option to save it, which normally I would always say save your data. I'm not going to do that here just for the sake of time, and I'll just copy this to my clipboard. So all this data, the tracking data is on my clipboard. I'm going to go back over to After Effects, and I'm going to create a new project here, or a new composition. I'm going to drag this 7 stones footage down to this little Create New Composition icon at the bottom of my project panel, and it opens up here. And I'm going to be tracking this stone here, or attaching the data for this stone to a null object. So Layer, New, Null Object. And I'll just paste. Apple V on the Mac to paste. Now I'm going to select the layer and hit the U key. The U is the Uber key, and this brings up all of the keyframed parameters here. I'm going to unclick the stopwatch for anchor point to remove the data there, because the anchor point and position can cancel each other out, and I don't need that data. So this is all I need. Nothing's going on here. You don't see anything really happening, but you can see the position keyframe set there. I'm going to go back to this in a few minutes, but it is here. We'll be parenting the data to that. Now I could do that with the settings, the transform settings from within 3D objects, but this way is just a lot easier. You know, the easiest way is usually the simplest way, or the best way. So I'm going to now create the text, and it will be applied to a new solid. So I'll go to Layer, New, Solid, and I'm going to call this, I'll call this 3D text. And click OK. I want to make this comp size. The color, however, doesn't matter at all. So I'll just click OK. And for this one, I'm going to be using BCC Extruded Text. So I'll go into my effects and presets and go under 3D objects and just grab Extruded Text and drag it to my solid layer. I'll type 7 Stones, which is the name of the film. And I've got the TRON font in here, as you can see. That's for the next project. But this will just be using Arial. Nice, simple, clean font. And I'm going to be using probably 32-point Arial. It's a little large here. I can always come back and adjust it later. That's probably pretty good. I can leave everything else at the default setting, so I'll click Apply. And this is the default look for extruded text. There's you might notice how the S and the O are a little bit jaggy. To fix that, under Render, I can turn up the polygon count. So I can crank it up. Oh, my caps lock's on. I can crank it up, and you can see that it will really smooth out the layers. I can crank it up quite a bit higher. Now this can affect your render settings, or your render time and screen redraw time, depending on how much RAM and how powerful your machine is and all that. I'm going to keep it turned down, even though I do have a lot of RAM. After I apply all the look of the stone to the letters, you won't notice it as much, and I can also turn that back up later. So now I need to style the text. So I like to start out with presets everywhere because it just makes workflow a lot faster. I can get going and get onto the project quite a bit faster instead of having to set everything up from scratch. So first I'm going to be using one of the presets here. It's called Gray Text with Ripple. And this gives me a nice beveled edge, but I do have this ripple. I just need to turn that off. I don't need a ripple for this project. So at the bottom here you see Use Ripple. I'll just deselect it and it goes away. So the next thing I want to set up is the extrusion. I'm going to set the extrusion depth a bit lower. One nice thing about these BCC 3D objects is that everything is broken up into different settings. So I have all of my transformation settings here. my path settings, material settings, extrusion settings, everything's separate. So it keeps it nice and tidy. I can just go through and find what I need really quickly, and it just makes workflow a lot faster. So I'm going to turn the extrusion down a little bit to about 1.5. I don't need the letters quite so thick. I'm going to set the bubble style to straight. It's currently on convex, which you can see it adjusts the front and loses that shine a bit. The bevel amount's probably pretty good. Maybe I'll turn it down just a little bit here. Make it a little tighter there. Now the side style, I'm going to leave that straight. However, I want to use one of these presets. Actually, I'm going to use a save preset here, and it's called dent.bcp. And you can see how it gives me that nice edge. And the next thing I want to do is set up the material. So I'll set up the stone look. What I really want this stone to look like is as if it was carved from some of the rocks that are in this little stone prison here. So I'll set up the materials. I'm going to twirl extrusion style closed and extrusion and go under material. And I'm going to be using one of these materials presets as well. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm going to set the front texture layer here. Sorry, front texture style, that's what I'm looking for, to stone metallic. You can see all of these different textures. There's just boatloads of different textures. Let me just show you a couple really quickly. They just give you a completely different look every time for everyone. You can also bring in your own. So you have a lot of options here. The nice thing about this program is that you can just make different things for every single project you work on, and you'll never make the same thing twice. So the one I want is stone metallic rock, and it gives me sort of this crazy stone texture, which I'll be modifying a little bit. I'm going to change the colors a bit. I'm going to make the diffuse light a little bit lighter here, and the highlight darker. And it doesn't really have much effect here now, but when I'm working, I usually don't do everything in this order. I'll probably go through and set up my settings and then go tweak and tweak and tweak. So that was what I ended up doing in the original project. I'm going to turn down the highlight amount just a touch, and the specular strength just a touch as well, which also doesn't look like it's having much effect on there. Let me go ahead to the front bump file. And I'm going to be choosing the metallic painted metal for this one. Metallic painted metal. There are a lot of effects here, a lot of textures rather. And I'll turn down the bump strength quite a bit. It's a little bit too bumpy. And I'm going to adjust the scale also. I'll scale it down slightly. Alright, so it looks a little bit like the rock here. There's quite a few other things I can set up. I'll be using the built-in light source. Let me go down and I'll do that first, the built-in light. And I'm going to change the type to a spotlight. Now at the top you may have noticed you have the option to use comp lights or built-in lights. We don't have any comp lights, so there's really no reason to have that on. But here it is without the built-in lights. There's quite a bit of difference here. So I'll leave the built-in lights on and then use comp camera. I don't have a camera on here either, so there's no reason to check that. There's a built-in camera that I could adjust, but I'm going to leave this as it is. Let me go back to the built-in lights here and change the light source a little bit. I'm going to bring the light source up. And let me just position it here so it's up over it. Once I position, actually, you know, I should probably go through and position it first because you're not seeing what the effect it has on it. So I'm going to go down to transform. Under the transform settings, I'm going to set the orientation so that I want it to look like it's sitting in the shot and it's floating over it a little bit. That's probably pretty good, and let me just rotate just a touch. Actually, I'm going to leave it like that. I think it looks really good. And I can change my position as well so that it's positioned where I want it to be. And let me go back to those light settings. Source is up there, and let me adjust the source Z. There we go. Now you can really see the effect it's having on the texture there. And everything else I think looks pretty darn good. I can adjust those render set or the polygon count if I want to smooth out the letters a bit more, which maybe I'll do right now. You know, it's not exactly as I want it to be, but a little brighter, it helps for you to see it. The next thing I want to do is create the shadow behind it. Now the easiest way to do that, to get a perspective shadow, is to just duplicate my layer. So I'm going to select this 3D text layer and Apple D on the Mac and select the one behind it and just hit the return key and type shadow so I know which layer is which. Now these are not 3D layers, they're 2D postcard layers. So if I were to rotate the layer itself, which I'll show you right here, you'll see that it's a flat layer. Actually, that's not doing what I want it to do. But anyway, let me go back to the shadow, and I want to position that. First, I want to fill the layer with black. So I'll just use a regular old fill from After Effects and type fill in my effects and presets panel and grab generate fill, drop it on the shadow layer. Oh, did I drop it on the wrong layer? Nope, I didn't drop it at all. All right, fill on the shadow layer. And the red is the default. Let me change that to black. And I'm going to rotate this now so that you can see the position and all that. I'm going to be using the transform settings from within the VCC extruded text filter, not the transform settings for the layer. Let me just rotate this back a little bit. Oh, which one do I want here? There we go. I can rotate the X and position it so that the shadow looks like it's flat on the floor. And I can move the shadow around too by adjusting the position X, Y until I get it into the position I want it to be in. I can make the shadow a bit longer as well by scaling the Y. Now I want to just keep in mind which way the light looks like it's coming from in the original shot too. Move that back into position here. And I want to blur the shadow so it looks a bit more natural. So I'm going to use fast blur that's included with After Effects. Just type fast blur into my effects, into my effects and presets panel, and I'll apply that to the shadow layer. I'm going to crank that up quite a bit to make it nice and soft, not too soft, and turn down the opacity of the entire layer so that it looks a little bit more natural. There we go. That's how you can, one major thing I just forgot to do is to attach it to the null object. I probably should have done that beforehand, but I'm going to grab both of my layers, select the 3D text layer and the shadow layer, that is, and I'll use parenting and parent those both to the null, null 2. And now you can see it. There, that looks a lot better now, doesn't it? So you can see how it moves right within the shot. Again, if I were working on this for real, I would probably tweak the color and all that quite a bit more so that it matches the shot like it did in the original. Here's the original. It's not nearly as shiny. Just one of the settings is different here. But I think that gives you the idea. All right, so we do have a lot to cover here. Moving along, I'm going to jump into the TRON settings for the TRON project. So let me open that project and save this. Always save your work. I have it under recent projects. Oops, wrong one. No. TRON, okay. Whoa. Yes, don't save. All right, so there's quite a few layers and quite a few things going on. I'll get to as much as I can here. I went through yesterday and tried to just kind of streamline this a little bit. So what I have going on is several layers of text generated with Continuum Complete 3D objects, and what I'm going to be doing is hollowing it out and giving it texture and adjusting the sides. So this project is quite a bit more complex than the last one. So I'm going to create a new composition to get started. We'll call this, you know what, sorry, I'm going to go back. I had one already set up here with the stripe in here. I also have a few things set up here, an adjustment layer that has the effects on it in case I get stuck, and then a couple of lights just because I don't want to have to deal with positioning those later on. Also in this composition, I have stripe.tiff. This will be used for the texture. Let me show you the file here. I'm going to zoom in to 100%. This will be probably a little bit difficult to see. It's just a white solid with a bunch of stripes. This was generated from After Effects with an alpha channel, and this is going to be tough to show you, I'm sure. So I'll just turn off the visibility of the background there, and you can see these little dashes between there. That's this checkerboard that you're seeing through it. So this is genuinely a striped layer with the alpha channel, and I'm going to show you how to utilize that, but I won't need to have that on, so I'm going to just turn off the visibility. And to create the first letter, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Solid. Again, I'm going to be applying these to a solid layer, and the letters BCC will be the ones I'm making large. I'm going to be creating the letter C in the center first, and then duplicating that layer to generate the other two characters pretty darn quickly. So there's a solid layer, and again I'm going to be using BCC extruded text. So under 3D objects, I'll grab extruded text and drag it to my solid, and the letter C. That's pretty darn small here. I want to make it very large in 132-point TRON font. And if I just hit the letter T, it goes straight to the T's. It helps if I have it selected, doesn't it? All right, so this TRON font is a free font. That's the default settings here for extruded text. Let me show you really quickly where you can get this font. If you go to dafont.com, just search for TRON. I'm using the second one here with a little cycle, and it's free to use, free to download. All right, so there's a few things about this that I want to explain. I'm going to be using the comp camera this time, so I'm going to check this Use Comp Camera box, and what this means is I'll add my own After Effects camera. Being able to use the After Effects camera is great if you're compositing, as we were in the last project, if I were to need a camera. So I'll go to Layer, New, Camera. Whoa, I just added in all objects. I'm too quick today. Layer, New, Camera. One important thing to note here, I want to be using a 2-node camera, not a 1-node camera. This will give me the rotation like I need. Another thing about the camera is that there really is no default settings. You can use a preset if you need to. However, it'll remember the last settings that you use. So there's really no default. It's just the last settings you use. So if you were to open your camera now and choose 35mm, it would not be the same settings as I have. So again, use 2-node camera for this. And then I'll just click OK. What I want to do is rotate this text so that I can see the side and the back as I'm working. I'll be resetting this later on. I want to be able to line up the text and all that as I want to. So this right here is just for reference now. I also could rotate using the transform settings. However, I want to be able to just reset really easily. So this is a great way to do it. The first thing I want to do is knock out the front and the back. For material count, I have a couple of options here. I want to make the I can make the front and the back and the bevel on the side the same, or I can make them all different or all the same. I want to use option 3 here, where the front and back will be the same and the bevel on the side will be different. So I'll select that one, and this will allow me to twirl down the front-back material and set my opacity to 0. And that knocks out the whole. Now it doesn't just turn it black. If I turn off the settings here, you can see that. Just so you can see this better, I'm going to turn up the ambient intensity quite a bit. You can adjust that later on if it's too bright, just so you can see it. That's probably pretty good as it is now. The next thing I want to do is texture this side file, the side of this image rather, and I'll be using that stripe file for that I brought in, that TIFF file. So I'm going to close front back material, which we won't be needing again, and opening side material. I can choose a preset for this, but instead I'm going to be using the side texture layer, which I'll use stripe. Now right now it's just a bunch of stripes on screen, and if I were to turn off the toggle transparency, you'd see that they're just black. And this is using the file as it is with no alpha channel. So for texture alpha, I want to choose straight alpha, since I do want to use that alpha channel. And then now you can see I can see right through those stripes, that they're definitely hollow, so it gives me more of a wireframe look. I want to add a little bit more texture to this because it's pretty plain. So I'll set the side bump file here. So many options. I'm going to set this to metallic bronze armor. And it gives me sort of a brushed metal look, but I do want to adjust that quite a bit. I want it to be stretched. I just wanted to give it a little bit of something extra. Turn down, or where am I here? Texture strength. I'll turn down the texture strength just a little bit so it's not so strong. And now I'm going to scale that pattern. So down below here I can scale the X up. I'm going to go to about 350. And that really stretches it. And I'm going to scale the Y now to about 50. So I'll scale that down. So I scaled up the X and down the Y, and it gives it sort of a brushed metal kind of texture. Because you have so many options to scale and move your textures, you could create so many different things in this program that you never make the same thing twice. The last thing I want to do in this section is to turn on two-sided lighting. I actually do want to do one other thing. I want to turn the opacity down a little bit of the whole layer. I'll turn that down to about 60. And this just gives it more of a kind of see-through look. Turn it up just slightly. And the last thing is two-sided lighting. So that allows me really to see through it. That puts another light in the back, so shining from the back. That's all I need to do for the side material. I can turn the transparency back on so you can see it quite a bit of the background. Next thing I want to adjust is the extrusion, and that's this front edge here around the side. So I'm going to twirl open extrusion, and I'm going to make that slightly lower, maybe 4.7, so it's not quite as wide. And I want to save the use a saved preset here. So for the bevel style, I'm going to use saved preset. And I'm going to use one called Raised Trim 1. Let me just go through and show you a couple of these if we have a second here, so you can see how they affect the different settings will affect the edges. Raised Trim 1 is the one I'm going to be using for this, so that's perfect. And I'm going to turn that up just slightly, make it a little bit thicker. And the next thing I want to adjust is the side. So it's set to straight right now, but I have the option of using, again, a saved preset, just like you just saw, or I can use a host path. So I'm going to show you the host path instead this time. I'll choose host path. And what I'm going to do is grab my pen tool and just draw right on the layer. And I'm just going to do this little arc here. And that's mask 1. If I click the layer and hit the M key, you'll see mask 1 has been added to the layer. So under the host path here, side host path, I'll choose mask 1 from the pull-down menu. You can see that it really made that a convex figure. What's cool is that I can drag around the points here and really change the shape of the letter. I can get pretty darn wacky with it. I can add more points to it as well. I want to get really specific. I just want a slight curve out here, so I'll just arc it a little bit. Not too much. That looks pretty good. You can also move the points down so you can see that it'll be more bent on one side. I like that how it is, so I'll leave that alone. And again, I want to check the, oh, I got ahead of myself here. That looks great. I'm going to leave that as it is. All right, so still under extrusion here, I want to do a couple other things. I think I did get ahead of myself again. That should be okay though. I'm going to go under bevel material. Let me just close that out and go under bevel material. And for the material preset, I'm going to be using one called Front Heavy. Oh, I am ahead of myself again. Okay, I've just gotten lost. Hold on here. Sorry about that. Oh, it's under the side save preset. Sorry, I have to go back. Side save preset. You know, I'm just going to go on. I'll skip that. It's probably not all that important anyway. I'm going to go back under bevel material, and the one I'm going to be choosing here oh, I've really got myself lost. Okay, color blue plastic is the one that I will find. Let me find this a minute. I know it's right in front of me. There it is. I was here the whole time. Sorry, guys. All right, so material preset, I'm going to be choosing color blue plastic. And you can see how that adds a nice little edge there. And I want to adjust my colors for the ambient lighting just a little bit. I'm going to go more into this turquoise and blue family. And some of these won't really have an effect. You won't really be able to see it too much as it is, but it's affecting the colors around the edge. So let me just make these a little more turquoisey blues and aquas. That one really has an effect. And the highlight color is this gray area. So if I were to really crank it up, you can see it changed a bit. Let me go back into the blue family, or light white blue. It's a little light here. That looks pretty good. So it actually is making it a bit more flat, but it'll give you an idea. Everything else looks pretty good here. Next thing I want to do is animate the character. Now you're probably noticing that this isn't very blue. We'll be adding that later on with the glows and all that. The glow and the film color effect that I'll be adding with the film, filter I'll be adding. I would also want to check two-sided lighting at the bottom of the bevel material, and that adds the back side of lighting again, which I don't really notice, but this is going to be really flipping around and moving in just a minute, and that's the next thing I want to do is animate this the effect. I'm going to set this back to 50% so I can see my whole screen. And there's a couple of things I want to do here. I want to reset that camera like I mentioned earlier. So I'll just twirl open my camera and click reset, and that gives me the effect straight on. And now I'm going to animate the position. So I want the effect, or the letter, to end or to land in its position about 4 seconds in. So I'm going to go to 4 seconds in my timeline and go under transformations. What I want to adjust the rotation X, rotate Y, rotate Z, and position Z. These will be the 4 that I'll be setting. I just click the stopwatch to set keyframes for all of those at 4 seconds in. I'm going to click the layer in the timeline and hit the U key, the Uber key, and now it brings up only those layers that I've keyframed. I'm going to go back to my first frame. I'll hit the I key to jump back to the first frame. And I want to animate this so it sort of comes from behind the camera as it spins in. I already have settings noted here that I used before. So I'm going to set the X rotate to about -45 degrees. I'll set rotate Y to 120 degrees, roughly. If I'm a little off, it doesn't really matter. And I'll set rotate Z to about 70 degrees. So you can see it's spinning on screen, but I also want to change this Z position to have it look like it's coming from the camera or from right above the camera. So I'm going to go negative 13 is probably about right. -13, type it in. Okay, so if I step along the timeline and see how it comes in, actually I'm going to change that that position here. I used a different camera setting than I did before, so that's having the effect on it. So I want to be able to see that's probably good there, about -8. So having a different camera setting will definitely affect the position of your setting, or of your settings for your text and that kind of thing. That's just something to keep in mind. It's not a big deal, but it can make it sometimes difficult to have a tutorial and have someone go, through it and have it match exactly. I'm going to set easy ease on all these keyframes, so I'll select all the keyframes, and I'm going to hold down my control key as I'm clicking, so that brings up this keyframe assistant. There's a few ways to get there. I'm going to go to keyframe assistant, easy ease, just easy ease, and that makes it kind of slowly move into the move, and then speed up, and then slowly slow down as it lands. You can have a lot of fun with this in the graph editor and that kind of thing, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to be doing that. So now I want to duplicate the letter C and make the other 2 characters. So I'm selecting the layer, and I'll duplicate twice. So it's Apple D or Command D on the Mac to duplicate, And I'm going to just rename the layer. So I'll select the layer, hit the return key, and type B, and then select the top layer here, hit the return key, and type C2. And C2 so that I know that it's the second C. All right, so I'll work on the B first. I'm going to hit that U key again to show my settings for the transformations. I want to add, though, position XY, and that's so I can move it over. One thing you notice when I just moved it, it's not in line anymore. I'm going to click undo here, and if I hold down the shift key as I'm moving it, it'll move over straight in the line. It'll keep the same horizontal axis, which is what I want. So I'll position it to where I want it to. Now I need to change the text. So I can just click Edit Text either down in the timeline or up in the Effect controls. I'll click Edit Text, type the letter B. Everything else is good to go. So I'll click Apply and see now that it's a B. I might want to move that over just a touch. Get a little closer. All right. One thing I need to do is change the settings for rotation and position because they're just looking exactly the same, and I want them to have a more random feel. So I'm going to just kind of randomly change the values and then eyeball them and see if they look good. And I'll change also the position. I can change position Z. I have a couple of options here. I'm going to select the B layer, hit the U key once again, twice, and that brings up this extra setting that I just had for position. I can move that over as well. And that may be my easiest way of doing this, just to kind of move it off the screen. All right, so as I just kind of click through this, you can see how the effect comes on. And right now they'll be landing at the same time, roughly. Oh, I changed something here. Oh, rotate Z, sorry. I just, let me set that back to 0. So that it's in the right place. Perfect. Okay. And I'm going to add easy ease on those as well. So I'll select my position XY and do the same things I did before. Keyframe assistant, easy ease. Okay, perfect. I just want to repeat the same procedure with C2. Let me quickly go through that. I'll select the layer, hit the U key, move it over. I'll set a time or a keyframe for position XY. Now I'm at 4 seconds in the timeline where they land. And click the crosshairs, hold down my shift key until I get it into the right position. We're right about there. All right, that's pretty good. I'll go back to my first frame and then repeat, just making random settings. And again, if I were to really work on this, I would probably want to be a lot more particular about how I'm moving things. But for right now, I don't think there's any need to. It gives you the idea. Just move that off screen, and I'll select the keyframes. Again, add easy ease to those. And I'll just click through the timeline. You can see how that lands. And I can tweak something if it's not quite interesting enough, which that C isn't quite. Let me just do something with it here, just to give it a little more variety so they don't look like carbon copies. All right, well, we'll call that good for now. I want to stagger these out so they don't quite land at the same time. So I'll just drag, I'll have the middle C land first and then drag the B and the C2 down a little bit in the timeline. So that varies when they come on screen and when they land. All right, that looks good to me. I want to add the word Continuum at the bottom here. And I'll be using a different filter. I want to start this text around 4 seconds. I'll add a new solid layer, layer new solid, and I'll call this Continuum, and click OK. Again, the color doesn't matter. It just needs to be frame size. Now I have my preferences set up so that any new layer will start at the first frame. However, I want this to start at 4 seconds. So I'll just click the left bracket key. That's a shortcut to bring it to 4 seconds. And this time I want to use BCC type on text, which is another filter in the 3D objects package. I'm going to type the word Continuum in all caps. And I'll change the font from TRON to Arial. Arial seems like a nice basic one to use. And let me just make it quite a bit smaller. about 36 point. And then I also want to adjust the kerning, or the tracking, so it's spread out just a bit more. Maybe about 20. Let's type 20 in there, and then I'll click apply. And you can see it show up here right in the middle. Again, it's got that jaggy edge like you saw in the last one, and this is the default settings for the filter. So I'm going to use a preset for this one as well, just to speed up my time and all that. Now with the type on text, what this will do is it will animate the text on and off. So I'm going to use the preset here called on long overlap. And if I step through it, you'll see what the effect does. It just kind of has it come on bit by bit. It auto animates. It's not keyframed. All right, I'm going to go back. Actually, I can work right from here where I can see it on screen. Now, the effect is moving a little bit too slowly. So I'm going to twirl open the type on reveal, which I can adjust the reveal time. I'm going to set that. The default is 75 for this, or the setting for this preset is 75 for the reveal time. I'm going to set it to 14. So it'll come on quite a bit faster. You can see that's, I don't know if it's 14 frames, it probably is. That looks pretty good there, and I'm going to, the master scale, I'm going to set that to 100. It's set to 300, and what that, if you notice when I was stepping through it, it started pretty darn big, and then it got smaller. I wanted to keep that size and just have the kind of the fade on and the rotate effect. That's all I need. A couple things I need to do here is to move the text below. So I'm going to go to Transformations and position XY and just kind of position it down here below where it looks good. That looks pretty good. All right, I think that's probably okay. Once I set the glow and all that, it'll pick up the color from that. So I'm going to leave the color as is for right now. All right, the next thing I want to do is add that grid floor background, and that's with a different layer. Let me or with a different composition. I have a TIFF file of a grid. This was created in Photoshop, and again, this one has an alpha channel, so you can only see the blue lines. So what I'm going to do is drag this into a new composition, and oh, I have my background layer set to blue. That's not too good, then you can't see it. So let me change my composition settings, and I'll change the background to black. And click OK. All right, that's exactly what it is. What I'm going to do is add a couple of effects to this to make it look like it sort of has electricity going through it, and I also want to fade out the top. So when it's positioned, it'll look like it's fading off into, you know, space or whatever. All right, so I want to add this noise filter, fractal noise. I'm going to apply that to a new solid. So go to Layer, New, Solid, and again, I'll make it comp size. I'm going to call this one Noise. And the color is unimportant because the effect will cover that up. I'm going to be using the VCC fractal noise settings. So I'll just type frac, and that should come up. VCC fractal noise. I'll drag that to the layer. There's also a fractal noise that comes with After Effects, which is quite nice. I'm going to be using the presets here again to get me going. The preset I'm going to be using is called Radiation. And it's pretty bright here, isn't it? That's probably, this one is, I'm going to animate it though. It doesn't really move. It's just a still setting with the color and all that. I'm going to be animating the mutation. So I'll click mutation to set, or I'll click the stopwatch to set a keyframe. And that's the in point. I'll click O to go to the out point. And I'll just randomly choose something. And it moves pretty quickly. I may want to turn that down, but electricity moves quickly, right? So maybe it's just fine. I want to add a rough glow to this. So I'll drag, it's under the VCC obsolete, but it's a great filter. So I'll drag that rough glow to the layer. And again, I want to use a preset. I'm going to be using the montage glow. I'll click first frame. I'm actually going to turn that effect off anyway. And it gives me this nice kind of stripey look. And if I step through it, oh, it goes away. That was the effect that I wanted to turn off. So I'm going to be just the glow scale. I'll click the stopwatch to remove the keyframe. And the blur amount actually doesn't move on this preset anyway, but it's keyframed. So now the blur stays the same, and you can see how it looks with the fractal noise. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to use the grid layer as a, or I'll use the noise layer as a Luma mat. So I'll select the grid layer and go to track mat and choose Luma mat noise. Now the noise layer is above it. This is kind of a subtle effect here, but you can see the brighter spots moving through here. And that's actually transparent through it since it's a Luma mat. I think that looks really nice. That's pretty good. The other thing I wanted to do is mask out the top of the layer so I can fade it back. So I'm going to be using the rectangle tool to draw a mask on the grid layer. I go way out here, and I'll draw it about 7/8 of the way up there. And I want to add a feather to this so it's not hard. It's not a hard line where it cuts off. So I'll select that grid layer and hit the F key for feather, and then just turn up my feather settings quite a bit so that it fades. Now, I have those other edges of my mask way out there so it doesn't really affect these other edges. So that's all I need to do for that grid. It's called Grid 2, and I'm going to drag this into my composition. We go back to the first frame and drag grid in. I'm going to make this a 3D layer. I'm going to turn parenting off here since I don't need to see that column. All right, so I have this grid layer. I'm making it a 3D layer, and I'm going to rotate it so that it sits back like a floor. I'll position it. I can also scale it so that it fits my screen. All right, that's pretty good. Let me go ahead here to more towards the end. I'm going to save. F11 on the Mac. It's always a good idea to save your projects. Move this down a little bit more here. That's probably pretty good, my positioning. I will be using a camera on this, so I do want to make sure that I don't see the edges of the grid at all. All right, now I'm going to add quite a few effects to get that glow. I do have a couple of lights already added, so I'll turn those on first. I have them hidden. I have an ambient light and here's my spotlight, which is pretty bright and it's set quite a bit above, and my ambient light, which is a blue color. I'll zoom out so you can see where the lights are positioned. There's my ambient light, or sorry, that's my spotlight. And it's quite a ways up there. I could animate the light, the position, that would be kind of cool, but for this purpose I'm not going to bother. Go back to 50% here. And I want to add an adjustment layer to bring all those glows. I want the glows to be affected by every layer. First, rotate the camera. Now, I can animate this camera if I wish to. I'm just going to rotate it for now, so you can see the side a little bit more. And there I can see the side of that grid. I suppose I shouldn't worry too much about it. Just move it over. That's pretty good right there. So for the glows and all that, I'm going to throw those on an adjustment layer. So go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And I'm going to be using 4 filters on that. Now this one I have so many different settings. It's hard to recreate this exactly as I had it in the first one. The first one I want to use is Film Damage, which is a BCC film damage under the film style effects. I'll drag that to the adjustment layer. And I'm going to be starting this one out with a preset as well, and it's called Kinda Blue. These are not animated presets. Notice at the top you'll see a bunch of presets, and then below that it says animated. Anything below is animated, anything above is not animated. So Kinda Blue is the one I want to use here, and it just gives my whole thing a nice bluish color. This one has grain and dirt and all that, which I don't want to use. I only want to use the color and the flicker settings. I'm going to go under color and change my color a little bit. Actually, I think this is good. I'll just leave it as it is, and I think the flicker settings are probably pretty good as well. Let's see, my flicker amount, my flicker speed. The flicker speed's a bit high, so let me turn that down a bit. Maybe I'll turn up the flicker amount. Now, depending on where I am in the timeline, you'll see different values because it is flickering. It's pretty subtle, actually. So I think that's probably pretty darn good. I'll leave that as it is. The next thing I want to add is edge lighting. So under the effects and presets, I'll just start typing edge lighting, and I'll drag that to my adjustment layer. Close that closed to keep this nice and tidy. This one I'm also going to be starting with a preset, which is Blue Neon Glow. .bcp. I'll apply that. Now that makes it pretty darn dark, and I don't want it to be nearly that dark. The edges are taken from the Luma channel, which is exactly what I need. Let me adjust the highlights to bring in a little bit more color here. If I adjust the highlight color to a brighter blue, kind of a turquoisey color, that adds another whole like a metallic-y look to it. And I'm also going to turn that up quite a bit because it's pretty darn dark. There we go. That looks pretty good. And I'll adjust the post blur a little bit to give it a little smoother look. And everything else here should be good to go. The last effect I want to add, which I have on the back of page 1, I changed some things yesterday just to make it a little bit easier on myself when I'm presenting. The lens flare. Now this is quite a few settings for it. The lens flare is a 3D flare, and it's a newer effect with the Continuum Complete package. So let me just apply it. BCC lens flare 3D. I'll apply it to the adjustment layer. And there's a few things I want to. I can use the comp camera on this one again. And so when I rotate, if I were to animate the camera, you'd see the flare moving along with it. I can show you really quickly. So it's not just in the spot. Now notice it does some kind of interesting things when I attach that flare. It repeats this grid up at the top, which is kind of a cool effect. So I'm going to leave it. So I'm going to use the preset here again called stripe.bsp. And it's loading. I got the beach ball. Okay, you don't see anything, but I'll be adding quite a few other things here. You know, it might just be best just to add these on now, what I need. I'll add some fog, so I'm going to click fog on. And this will just help so that it brightens up the shot a little bit. Now you can see the stripe. I'll add rays, so I'll just click these on. Where it says rays on, I'll check that. Notice when I click these, that turns on the settings, and now I have the option of opening them up and changing the values. I'll just leave these as their defaults though. I'm going to turn hollows on. That brightens it up just a little bit. And faded ring, I'll turn that one on. And the flare, of course. Flare layer needs to be on. There we go, that brightens it up quite a bit. And the stripe should be on. Let me make sure that those settings are okay. And I can adjust the color if I want to brighten these up a little bit. You don't really see the stripe now too much behind that big flare. Let's change those flare settings while I'm thinking about it. So I want to change the color to blue so it stays in my blue family that I'm working with here. I'll change it to maybe more of a royal blue. It's not quite royal, but you get the idea. I'll turn down the intensity just a little bit because that's a pretty big flare. And I'll set this trigger edge on. Yes, trigger edge on, and the edge distance, let me just turn it up just a little bit. That doesn't look like it's having much effect, but if I were at a different position with the light, you may see something completely different. Let me also, scale looks good. Okay. I want to animate the light source, and this will really have an effect on it. I'll use the light source setting for built-in, and I'll twirl that open, and I want to adjust both the position and the position Z. Now again, because I'm using the camera and I'm using a different camera setting than I used before, these values may not match what I originally had, which is okay. And that's the After Effects camera causing that little issue that I'm running into where I can't duplicate something exactly. It's not the software, the Boris Continuum Complete software. So let me just animate this lens flare. I'm going to start about a little bit before the Continuum text comes on and everything sits. So I'm going to set kind of a high number with this keyframe. I really want to affect that. You know, I'll just type in about 8600. Seems like a good number. And you see it's really bright there, and I'll set that other number to 0. It's not exactly where I wanted it though. It's a little bit too bright. Let me change that to a little lower so it's not on screen. I don't want it to just cut on screen. screen, that looks pretty good right there. So I have a keyframe set. I'm going to jump ahead to about 6.5 seconds and move the position. I'm going to go for about negative 7,500 this time. So depending on the position of the camera, it'll adjust how this moves. I'm not really sure why I'm getting this problem here. I found this before. I don't remember what it was though. Is it the position Z? There we go. All right, so I'll step through that so you can see how that flare comes on. There is something else that's causing that to cut off on the side, and I can't remember what it is. It's one of the settings here. I'll have to go through and have a look later on. Maybe it said I'm not using comp camera. There it is. Now I'm using the comp camera. Okay, I thought that was checked before. I must have unchecked it. Nope, it's still there. But anyway, it gives you kind of the idea. Let me adjust the flicker. So go under light flicker settings, and I'll let it flicker a little bit. There's no flicker on there now. So I'll adjust the amount, and for fun, I'll just change the value of the seed. Set the amount to about 20. But you don't have the flare on screen, so you're really not seeing it right now. I'm not sure what's causing that. There's something I have set up here that's funky. I'll find it. I can save this project and I can upload it to Toolfarm, so you can download it if you would like to check it out. Now under auto shimmer, excuse me, I want to set the speed up quite a bit, maybe to about 80, 75 or 80, and I'll set up the amount so you can see it. There you go, and that's affecting this flare and how it's shimmering. When I step through it, you can see how the effect looks pretty nice. The last thing I want to do is add a bit of glow to this because it is a little hard. And this jaggy C is kind of bugging me on Continuum, so because it's set so low. So I'm going to go back to that Continuum layer, go under Render, and just turn up the polygon count a bit so that it's nice and smooth. That looks good. And then the last thing on that adjustment layer, I wanted to add the rough glow again. So I'll drag rough glow onto the adjustment layer. And let me just change a few of these settings. I'll twirl lens flare closed. And I want to make the blur a little bit less because it's a little bit too strong here. And let's see, I'll adjust the threshold a bit. Okay, that's not really having a whole lot of effect. I'm going to set this overdrive to 0. Oop, wrong thing, wrong setting. Overdrive to 0, and that softness was the last thing I just adjusted. I wanted to set that to about 3, to about half of what it is. So it's not quite so soft. I want to have it somewhat soft, but not too soft. All right, so I'm just going to step through this. You can see the effect. All right, I'm going to turn off this lens flare. I'm not sure what the problem is with that. I fixed it yesterday, though. I saw the same thing. It's just one little checkbox I have. I'll find out what that is. And again, I'll save this project up online so you can download it if you want to check it out later. And you can get a free demo. It's a 14-day trial of Continuum Complete. You can download it from either Toolfarm or from Boris's website, boriseffects.com. And it's not watermarked. You can try it and run everything and see how you like it. I'm sure you'll love it. It's a great product. So there you go. That's how you can mimic the look of the TRON type with Adobe After Effects and Boris Continuum Complete.